Thanks for listening to the latest Beyond the Back Four podcast, available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.
Welcome to Beyond the Back Four, where we're looking back over another action-packed weekend in the Premier League. Chelsea and Arsenal played out an entertaining draw. We've got a red card to talk about there. Manchester United came back and won a game of football, which feels like that hasn't happened for a very long time. And Liverpool also won a game of football, which definitely hasn't happened for a very long time. And they did it in a sort of boring, reasonable fashion, which is exactly the sort of thing you'd think Arne Slot would want. And today we'll be hearing from former Premier League referee Mark Clattenburg, our football finance guru Kieran Maguire, and Premier League football scout, a man with an extraordinary tale. It's Paul Montgomery. So we'll start. Paul, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Obviously, it's Monday and I don't know what the weather's like there, but it's atrocious up here. But, just getting your head around the results at the weekend. And but there's some great games, there were some amazing goals. I mean, getting away from the conversation there, I mean, what about the Bournemouth goal there and being on the losing side, scoring a worldie like that, how does he feel today? But what a goal, great vision. Oh, amazing. But there were some good goals, some good games and some entertainment, all over the weekend. I've thoroughly enjoyed this weekend.
Well, glad to hear it. Right, we'll go straight to Chelsea and Arsenal. Kieran, before we talk about the finances, we're about to get Mark's view. But first, the main talking point is a former Brighton player, isn't it?
That's right. Moises Caicedo, red card. I was travelling home from Brighton's victory in Nottingham at the time, so I didn't see it live, but I've seen it on Match of the Day. I don't get many opportunities to do that. Looked like a clear red. And Anthony Taylor did the right thing. He took his time, made the correct decision. I think anybody that's watched Caicedo wouldn't be particularly surprised. He is a very combative player, and he does get stuck in. So I think quite a few people have been surprised that he's not had 2 yellows in the past, although clearly this was a straight red. But yeah, fair play to Chelsea. And another former Brighton player, Robert Sanchez, performed extremely well in goal, much to my annoyance. And they deserved at least a point.
The great bit, I thought, with the red card was not the Caicedo effort to win the ball. It was his reaction after, in which he seemed just as hurt. That was joyful.
I think that's that's professionalism. If you know that you've done something wrong, try to divert, distract, and so on. Is how players are coached, rightly or wrongly.
Right, let's get Mark's view. Mark, with this one, Anthony Taylor obviously at the centre of a lot of conversation. Do you feel he set the tone early, or did he put himself under pressure by sort of getting cards out quickly?
There was an important Premier League game this weekend where Chelsea hosted Arsenal, top of the table Premier League clash, refereed by one of the top referees in the Premier League, Anthony Taylor. He decided early in the match to issue yellow cards. Some referees could have managed that situation. The game was very, very nervous. Players were going into challenges, certainly hyped, maybe by the crowd, the coaches, but the players were going into challenges, and that escalated when Caicedo went into a challenge with Moreno. He's certainly gone over the top of the ball. He catches Moreno on the shin with his studs, with speed, and certainly with some force, and therefore it certainly met the criteria of a red card, because he can clearly endanger the safety of his opponent. And certainly that type of challenge with the studs, that on that part of the leg can break a leg. Anthony Taylor doesn't see this incident because he plays the advantage, and he comes back and issues a yellow card. So he certainly doesn't see it, because referees would, if they see a red card challenge like that, they would instantly stop the game. So he doesn't see it. It was recommended by the VAR to watch it, and when you watch it in slow motion, and certainly watch it in real time, you can clearly see the impact, the speed, and that type of challenge. And the VAR was correct to recommend the review on Anthony Taylor to change his original decision to a red card. The player can have no complaints when you watch back this type of challenge, because in the Premier League now, these type of challenges will always be issued with a red card, certainly when you put studs on a opponent's shin with some speed. It certainly can endanger the safety of the opponent. So I don't think the player can have any complaints. And then there was another incident where Chalobah went up with an aerial challenge with an Arsenal player. Chalobah certainly after the challenge, the aerial challenge, had a mark on his face. But when you look at the challenge, you see this type of challenge, and what referees are looking for is, does he swing his arm into his opponent? And he definitely jumps. You look at his eyes are focused on the ball. That's not always, a get out clause. But you look at also the hand, and the hand is quite open. So when players are jumping for the ball, they normally have an open hand because they're trying to get elevation. And normally when you have an open hand, you're not using it for force. When players clench their fist and swing an arm, they're getting some force use. So referees can sometimes use that difference between an open hand and a closed hand to recognize if the arm has been used as a tool to jump or a weapon to put the elbow to an opponent's face. And I think Anthony Taylor calls this one correct. The arm is open, the hand is open. He's using it for elevation. He does cast his opponent, but therefore this would be classed as a reckless challenge and a yellow card issued. And I think when the VAR looks at this, he would have examined how the hand is open or closed, how the player jumps. Does he look at his opponent? All of these elements certainly weren't met to reach the criteria of a red card. So I believe Anthony Taylor called this one correct.
Let's talk about, Paul, the nature of this game, what it means for the Premier League table. Arsenal obviously have looked so strong, and people have talked about them as running away with a title, and it's sort of already the race is almost run. But pegs them back a little bit. City win again. Might we see a little bit of pressure put on this Arsenal team over this fixture period now?
Yeah, I think, but they come under the umbrella of everybody. It depends who they can keep fit. I mean, they have got a team, not a team. They have a group who are top level players. So unlike a lot of clubs who have injuries and they can't put back onto the pitch, the same equivalent of the level of who was injured, Arsenal appear not to have that problem. They have a super duper group of players who, in actual fact, are top of the league, and at the moment don't look like form, because when they have got players missing, like Gyökeres and what have you, it hasn't appeared to have affected them too much, which is a good sign for them, and at the back, both the central defenders, we can go on and on and on, but the moral of the story is they're still not losing, which is a great trait in the game, not to lose. And yesterday was a super game, first against second, lots of passion. When you're looking at players and scouting players, a major factor is the players' temperament, and watching them. But in a game like this, you've got to give allowances for passion, because if you have no passion, you shouldn't be playing the game, and there was a lot of passion, which you have. And it's difficult for the referee, on games like this, because he's got to factor in passion in the game, in this game, and some of the tackles, were should we say lively, and but for Caicedo, it was a bit, he got a red card. At the time, you thought he's let down, he'll be thinking, I've let down the team, I've let down my colleagues, etc., but they stuck in, they hung in, and I think a draw was a fair result, to be honest.
Kieran, if we talk about the finances of the Premier League title race, looking at the January window, we know this City's team are not as good as previous City teams. Chelsea are probably exactly where they want to be. Maybe they weren't expecting to be challenging or thinking about challenging this season. But City are 5 points behind Arsenal. Chelsea are only 6 points behind. Do you think either club is likely to spend big in January to try to make that points gap up?
Well, there's always two elements to consider. First of all is their capacity to spend from a PSR perspective. And secondly, do the clubs have the physical cash? In the case of Manchester City, they're in a strong position. They have been profitable in recent years. We have to park the 115 charges and the repercussions from that. So they certainly have the ability to buy players. Remember, the likes of De Bruyne are no longer on the payroll as well. So yes, they can, and I know that they've been linked with Semenya, who I went to Bournemouth a few weeks ago. He looks absolutely brilliant. He's on fire at present, and that could assist them in terms of the width. So yes, I think City can spend if they want to. I think their track record in the last probably 2 or 3 seasons has been a bit spotty by City standards, which will delight any Manchester United fans watching this. And as for Chelsea, Chelsea get a lot of stick for their player recruitment, but everybody ignores the exit door. Chelsea have they've generated twice as much money from player sales as Liverpool and Manchester City, 5 times as much as Manchester United, 2.5 times that of Arsenal. They use the player trading model as both an exit and an input door. And yes, again, I think they had a bit of a hiccup in June 24 where they had to get players off. The thing that's going to constrain them, however, and this has very much gone under the radar, is that they were in breach of UEFA's rules last season, and they are being monitored very carefully. So therefore, what Chelsea have to do is they have to have a zero net spend in terms of what you might call their Class A players. So if they do buy, they only just scrape through in the summer 2025 window. They're going to have to do the same in January 26. But with Chelsea, you look at the squad, and yes, it looks short in some areas, but bloated in others. And they are very good at persuading players to leave. Strasbourg seem to like Chelsea's players for some strange reason, and that's always a useful vehicle if they're trying to get players out of the door.
Let's talk about that recruitment. Paul, from your perspective, you've in the world of scouting, what is your view of how Clearlake Capital have invested in Chelsea's squad? They've gone for younger players and loads of them.
I mean, at the time when you see Chelsea buying, just it's like a trawler netting in, it's like putting out a net like the trawler in the sea and just hooking in the fish, etc. They appeared at one stage to just be buying everybody and anybody, and you're thinking, is that a good sign? Surely they can't facilitate, or the manager must have a headache, because it would take him 2 months to remember the names of everybody that they were buying. However, from a financial point of view, which Kevin has just highlighted, they have been really, really amazing at it, because you've got to understand although they're netting in all these young players, they loan them out, they then sell them for increased fees, etc. So you can't really knock the system, whereby somebody like myself, who's used to working with a budget of 2 balloons and a goldfish, do you know what I mean? It's kind of dead infuriating, the fact that they have all this money and they just spend money on anybody, But look, what they're doing at the time, I thought was a bit of looked as though it was a possible disaster, but it's been anything but a disaster, because what's been highlighted is that they haven't lost money over it. They've actually increased turnover, they've increased the revenue by the sale of these players that they've brought in. So you can only credit where it's given.
Thank you. We are going to move on now to Crystal Palace versus Manchester United. I will add, just for anyone who was excited about counting Chelsea's red cards, that's 4 in 13 games now, which is twice as many as anybody else. So, Crystal Palace, Manchester United. First of all, Paul, overall thoughts on the game. What was good about it? Who impressed you?
I watched the game. In the first half, I thought Crystal Palace could have been 2 or 3 up. I thought they did a normal Crystal Palace game on Man United. Man United weren't at the races in the first half. They were second to every ball. The big fella up front for Crystal Palace is a handful. He can not only hold the ball up, but he's a threat at all times, Mateta. And then, in my opinion, they have a brilliant midfield player who could be the country's next Brian Robson. That's Adam Wharton. For a player who always wants to go forward, it's a pleasure to see. When you're identifying players. I mean, he is a proper player. In football, you have fair players, you have good players, you have great players, but you have difference players. You know, Eze was a difference player and Elise was a difference player at Crystal Palace. I'm not just because it's just coincidental that they both played. They're both what I would call a difference player. So if you're recruiting, they are a difference. They can change a game in a flash. And Wharton is coming into that category very soon. I think he's a top player in the future. I think he's in England international, and and you've got to understand he's had bad time with injuries. So apart from speaking to someone in the club, to find out him, I don't think he'll actually be 100% fit at the moment. But he's getting there, and you can see when you're watching him. And I just thought yesterday in the first half, I thought he was superb. Absolutely head and shoulders above anything else. And I think Man United's problem is the centre of defence. And I think they would have loved to have him in their side, to be brutally truthful. Because although Casemiro is a good player, he just hasn't got the legs at the moment. And I think if you're going to beat Man United, you've got to go straight through the middle, because of their lack, and they haven't got anybody, a winner. They haven't got a Roy Keane. It's the spine. When you're putting a side together, which I always did, you got the spine right, from the guy who's going to win, protect the back four and your central defender, etc., etc. And they play a 3, and maybe the manager hasn't got 2 central defenders that he can hang his hat on, So Alec, he had Vidic and Ferdinand, and I think that helped him retire. When he thought, oh, hang on, when I've lost there, who have I got to win it? Because I'm expected to win a Champions League, etc., etc. And I think that kind of helped him retire at the time he did when he lost those players. Because you've got to have that spine, 100% if you're going to be a top side. No ifs, buts, or maybes. That is the main ingredient. But so I thought the first half, and then obviously I was interested to see Amarin's chat on the TV. He was spot on when he said to his players at halftime when they asked him what difference did he make, because there was a difference. The intensity, their closing down, their press was a lot better in the second half, Man United, and that was the manager had said, look, we've got to do that. We've got to put some stronger press in, and they look tired. Even the manager said they look, and he's right, because Palace have a very small squad, shall we say, to play Europe and to play Premier League games on a Sunday. So, but it was strangely enough that the manager of the opposition actually noticed this even in the first half, that these are getting tired, and if we hit them, if we hurt them, they will possibly cave in. And actually that's what happened. It was a tale of two halves, and Man United did press high. They got it right in the second half, and Crystal Palace they did tire, and it was accepted that because of the size of the squad and playing on a Thursday and then again on a Sunday morning. And then, it's not just the playing. What you have to factor in as well is the travelling. Because when I was working around Europe and what have you, I would go away and go here, there, and everywhere, and I would come back and I would say, I'm absolutely shattered here. And people look and say, shattered? What? How can you be shattered just going around watching games? Do you know what I mean? And it's the travelling that made you tired, not the fact, because some people say, well, you should get a proper job. And then you've got a reason to be tired. But for me, what I'm trying to say is it's not just the players playing, it's the travelling as well. It's a fatigue scenario, and I don't know what they're going to do. They're going to have to maybe bring in 2 or 3 players in January to help to help their cause if they're still in the European Conference League. That's my opinion. But overall, yeah, game of 2 halves. And I just thought Mateta was awesome at his penalty. He showed a lot of great temperament, a lot of, to be able to score and then have to take it again and then bang, put it in the opposite corner. Yeah, great from the player. And then Man United just improved their press in the second half, and it worked.
It certainly did. Kieran, we know that winning one game doesn't make a huge difference, but at a club like United, where there's a lot of pressure on Ruben Amorim, I suppose that will help maybe just lift the mood a little bit after the home defeat to Everton. But what about players like Joshua Zirkzee, Mason Mount, players who have cost money but not necessarily performed at the expected level consistently for United? Because the club are now 7th, 3 points off of 3rd, but only 3 points ahead of 14th. So it's important to find these little wins, isn't it? And not suddenly fall away. There's a lot of questions in that question.
I think any club that goes on a run, and Manchester United were on a good run prior to the defeat against Everton, so I think that knocked them back, and the manner of the defeat, to lose to 10 men at home, will have frustrated many people. And with Manchester United, there's always a lot of noise. So this was a way of perhaps calming down that. We're now entering a period of what December looks crazy. We've got early December fixtures. We've got the Christmas fixtures as well. I think this is where a club such as Manchester United and those players such as Zirkzee and Mount and so on can make a difference, because this is where having the £1 billion squads as opposed to Crystal Palace, who have got a squad which costs just over 200 million, but that's what you live by if you're a small club. They will, I think, be able to perhaps establish a bit of a run, and as you say, that there's very few points in it, and it's the same in the Championship. It's very weird this season that 2 wins, 3 wins in a week, and all of a sudden you're up 10 places. Remember, you were talking about Villa 6 weeks ago as potentially bottom 6, and now they're 4th.
Let's get Mark's view then on the Mateta penalty and the double tap and VAR's role in all of that, and how well they did or didn't manage that situation.
And then we had a situation in the Crystal Palace Manchester United game, which hasn't really been seen in the Premier League much. There was a rule change last season where FIFA and IFAB changed, where if there is a double touch and it's accidental double touch, the penalty kick will be retaken, which caused, there was a Champions League game, I think some seasons ago, where it created a huge debate in such a big moment. But the law was clear then that if you made a double touch, it would be an indirect free kick. But now they've changed the law that if a player makes an accidental touch at a penalty kick, the penalty will be retaken. And Mateta, when he takes the penalty, it looks like he's foot shaped to go where the goalkeeper is actually diving, but it seems to take another touch of his second foot, which diverts it into the other side of the goal. And that double touch certainly created an issue for the goalkeeper. And the VAR was correct to highlight this to the referee and to make a retake. I think this is a great law change, because when a player accidentally does it, it's not a deliberate action, and a penalty kick should be retaken, because it felt unfair when it's an accidental contact for an indirect free kick to be taken, especially if you slip, for example, at the taking of the penalty. So the penalty was correctly retaken, and Mateta scored from the penalty kick. So fairness was raised. I do like this law change, but it's certainly previous seasons, this would have been an indirect free kick and Crystal Palace wouldn't have had a second chance. But with this new law change, it allowed Crystal Palace to score the penalty kick.
Thank you, Mark. Right, let's talk about Liverpool. They beat West Ham 2-0. Kieran, we're talking about boardrooms and pressures like we just were with Ruben Amorim. Arne Slot is certainly under some pressure. A lot of Liverpool fans are unhappy with him. High-profile former players like Jamie Carragher have been talking about the possibility that they're closing in on the time where it might be appropriate to relieve him of his duties. But this win will help enormously, won't it? Because it wasn't dramatic, it was smooth. But also, I guess, one thing that helped him is that he showed the courage to drop a big player in Mohamed Salah and still get the win.
That's right. If you take a look at the success of any football club, it comes down to 3 issues: opportunities, resources, and decision making. Now, the opportunities for Liverpool, being in the Premier League, being in the Champions League, are very much at the upper end of the scale. They've got the resources in terms of a very good backers, in terms of FSG, in the sense that they're smart. They're not benevolent, but being smart is just as good as being big. And then when it comes to decision making, people have questioned the recruitment over the course of the summer. It does put additional pressure on the manager, which seems a little bit strange. Liverpool have won 2 Premier League titles in 30 odd years, and he's won one of them as recently as 6-7 months ago. But again, that goes with the pressure of managing a club of the calibre of Liverpool. Whereas if you were at a smaller club, there'd be a few grumbles, but it wouldn't be picked up in the mainstream media and social media. Liverpool is always big news. Liverpool always delivers content as far as broadcasters are concerned, and other media outlets. And on the back of that, Slot made a decision. They won the match. He should be lauded for that, because the easiest thing is to not do anything controversial. But it's come off well for him.
Yep, certainly has. Let's talk, Paul, about that recruitment strategy and specifically Alexander Isak, Florian Wirtz, and the roles they have in the team, and then how that relates to Salah, who obviously was Player of the Year last year and now finds himself 13 games in and being dropped because it just wasn't working.
Well, look, I mean, the bottom line was, I think yesterday the manager went back to basics. Put a back four, that's a back four. He didn't have square pegs and round holes. The Hungarian boy, who was a good player in midfield, forgive me for not being able to pronounce his
Szoboszlai.
Szoboszlai, that's it, good man. He's a good player, but he ain't a fullback. And that's where he's been playing it to suit Salah. So instead of having a team with names on the starting sheet, he's gone more for which players are better to play in the position rather than the name. And Salah, it was a big call for him to leave him out. I still don't think he'll be. I think he'll use him during the week or maybe next week. He won't freeze him. It's not the end of Mo Salah. Will never be the end of him. But he's a difference player. When he's on his game, he hasn't been on his game this season to the level of what we're accustomed to. But so Salah, he was left out yesterday, but the team looked a bit more balanced. I still say that they're lacking two players. They need another central defender, which isn't rocket science. And I think they should have took Mark Gay when they could, because I think he's a super duper defender. He's not easy on the eye, but he's just there when somebody needs to be there in the right position. He's there, and I think they need a number six, a top number six who can just win it and protect the back four. The rest is, they've got brilliant players in offensive positions, and the German boy, Wirtz, he's a top player. In time, you'll see. I'm sure he'll come to fruition like is the expectation, and you've got to understand that, with early doors, they've only been playing together for 2-3 months, and I just think there'll be improvement there. And then obviously we saw what Isak could do at Newcastle, but I don't think, one thing I'm a bit negative about with Isak is because his game will have to change, because Isak was brilliant at Newcastle because they played on the counter and they played in behind the opposition back four, which suited Isak because he's quick. He used to put in balls through, chance balls over the top. Boom! Isak, Murphy, Gordon were dangerous, with that. But now, because he's playing for Liverpool, who have the ball more and have to open doors more, it's a different kind of game that he has to learn. It's a different type of game where he has to more close control, more, in the box. As you can see, most teams who play Liverpool go with a stringent 4 or 5 at the back with 4 in front. It's a brick wall you've got to get through. So mentally, he has a different kind of game that he has to learn himself, because his attributes in the past have all been the pace and in behind, and he isn't going to get that when he's playing for Liverpool, because nobody defends against Liverpool, because arguably at the beginning of the season they were thought to be going to be the league winners, So if you're matching yourself up to try and get yourself a result against them, you're not going to defend a high line. You're going to make it hard for Liverpool to break you down.
Kieran, with Liverpool, what do you imagine happens now? Because they obviously will want to be in the Champions League. They want that extra income. They'll accept that they're not going to win the Premier League this season. But how dramatic is it if their form returns to the way it was a few days ago, and they don't make it into those Champions League spots? Because currently they're 8th.
They're 8th, but they're a couple of points off 4th.
That's it.
Again, it's one of those.
Close. Yeah.
So again, a good 8 days and you're transformed. We've seen this with other clubs as well. What we have seen is, as a result of the Super League, the people at UEFA have given more and more concessions away to what you might refer to as the big clubs in terms of the potential monies available via the Champions League. It takes over three quarters of the pot, and that pot has got bigger and bigger. They've done very well. So now you can make £150 million in prize money. You're going to qualify for the Club World Cup, so you can bank another 40 or 50 on that. It's Champions League or nothing, and as far as player contracts are concerned, that is reflected there as well. The players will be on a 25% bonus in all probability should they qualify for the Champions League, so they are hugely incentivized to get that far. And yeah, that will also be the case for the manager and so on, I would imagine. FSG can cope with a couple of seasons outside of the Champions League because they're actually a very cautiously run organisation, and that's for the benefit of the club in the long term. Although, of course, as fans, we've got long term is a week, so I don't see it as a huge issue. But it's a bit like when you're asked to submit your CV and certain characteristics are desirable but not essential.
Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Right, we're going to wrap this one up right there. That is us looking beyond the back four of another weekend of Premier League action. Thank you very much, Paul. Thank you, Kieran. If you are watching on YouTube, make sure you're subscribed. Get in the comments, give us your opinion on the big talking points. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, make sure you give us a rating. We'd really appreciate that. And we will see you next time. Oh, we're back on Wednesday, actually.
Thanks for listening to the latest Beyond the Back Four podcast, available on YouTube and all podcast platforms. Subscribe now so you don't miss a single episode.